In this video, we're going to talk about one of the keys to unlocking massive momentum, progress, and success with your no-code app and business. Now, I've had a lot of conversations about this with app entrepreneurs over in our free Facebook group, here in the YouTube comments, and even with them reaching out to us just via email, letting us know that they're struggling. See, a lot of people have this idea for their app and for their business. They know what they want to achieve and what they're aiming for, but they have a really hard time executing on all of the steps that lead them towards that. In fact, they have a hard time even figuring out what those steps should be. And what they're left with is just thinking about that big picture goal that they want to achieve with their app and their business, but then they struggle to actually move towards it. I see this happening all the time. If you haven't started building your app, or maybe you've started, but you are finding yourself struggling, then this is going to be helpful for you, because we're going to talk about one of the biggest keys to breaking free of that and actually moving towards that bigger picture outcome that you are aiming for. Now, make sure you stick around until the end, because if this is helpful for you, then we have a free training that's actually going to take it much more in depth and get you moving forward even faster with your app and your business. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. Now, first, if you're new around here, my name is Kristen, and I'm the co-founder of Coaching No Code Apps, where we help business owners and industry experts build custom apps to either start their app-based businesses or grow their existing businesses all without coding and with no technical background required. So what is the key to unlocking all of this momentum and all of this progress? Well, it's actually pretty simple. The key to unlocking momentum with your app is to stop focusing on the 10 steps out, the 20 steps out, the 100 steps out, and instead rein it way in and start focusing on the next step in front of you. All right, I'm going to say this again. Stop focusing on the 10 steps out, the 20 steps out. Start focusing on the one right in front of you. I have a very strong feeling that if you take the time to think about that, it will resonate with you. As an entrepreneur, you are probably always thinking very far out. You're a visionary. You have a lot of ideas. You have a lot of solutions. You're constantly thinking of new things you can create. You're constantly thinking farther out, and you might have a hard time bringing that in, and that's normal if you do. Now, the question is, how do you rein that in? And how do you actually focus on not only the next step in front of you, but the right next step in front of you? Because that's part of the problem too. You can have the destination, right? But if you don't have the path, and you don't have the path that leads you towards the destination, then you're kind of stuck. So that's what we're going to talk about today, how to actually do that so that you can move forward. Now, when we work with our own private clients, the very first thing we have them do when they're launching apps to start or scale their businesses is we have them create a roadmap, a very strategic roadmap. Because again, as entrepreneurs, they're visionaries. They have lots of ideas. They're thinking very far out. And it can be nearly impossible to make progress, tangible progress on something when you're only thinking farther out. So we have to start with a strategic roadmap that takes you from that idea stage, right, where you're thinking of the solutions, right, that you have in mind, to the stage where you're not only able to launch your app, but you're also able to launch your app with an intended outcome in mind. Now, this is important, right? Because what you need to do is stop just thinking about the technical features of your app. That's where a lot of people get stuck, is they're thinking really far out. They're thinking of their full scope app. They're thinking of what they want it to look like, but they kind of forget all the other factors that go into actually getting there. There are lots of different levers that you need to pull at different points along the way, lots of different strategies you need to implement, right? So the best thing you can do right now is create a structured, strategic roadmap that leads you from your idea stage to having the app that will help you achieve whatever the outcome is you are looking for on the other side, the outcome for your users, the outcome for yourself, for your lifestyle, for your business, all of that. Okay, so what I'm going to do is share my screen, and we're going to jump over to the whiteboard. And we're actually going to walk through how to come up with this roadmap for yourself. So what you need to think about is, number one, your starting point. You're over here, or you're at least somewhere over here. And you need to think about what you're working towards. So we're creating a roadmap here that takes you from idea to being able to launch and thus achieve those ultimate goals and outcomes that you are looking for. And to get from one to the other, we have to break up our development and some other components related to the launching and the testing of your app. We have to break that up into phases. Because if you're only thinking, again, about the thing that you want to launch, then you're never going to be able to think about the next step you need to take. It's hard to rein that in. So we have to break this up into smaller phases so that you can start thinking a little bit more granularly about the individual steps you need to take versus just that end picture or goal that you're looking for. So when we're creating a roadmap, we're going to break this up into 4 different phases. Okay. Now, we are going to start looking at features, the technical features of your app. We're going to start there because once we have those laid out, that can help us decide on where to pull these other levers that I talked about in terms of testing, in terms of launching, bringing users on board, getting feedback, and all of those different things. Okay, so the very first thing I want you to do is take that full app idea you have, all the features, that big picture scope that you are envisioning, take that whole thing that you're constantly thinking about, and I want you to break it up into individual feature buckets. Okay, so your app can have an infinite number of little features because every main feature in your app is going to have a sub feature, and sub features will have 3rd tier features and so on. Okay, so we're just going to look at feature buckets, the big overarching features of an app. If you have a marketplace app, we're going to be looking at the different dashboards, bringing users on board, whatever the marketplace enables, buying, selling, things like that. So just the bigger picture feature buckets. We're going to break those up into different phases. The first one we're going to look at is our must-have feature buckets or primary features. And we're going to look at our should-haves. I can write better than that. We're going to look at our could-haves. And we're going to look at our won't-haves. And don't be turned off by the won't-haves. I'm not going to tell you can't include anything in your app. We'll get there. So you're taking that big picture app idea, the thing that you're constantly thinking about that's leaving you very stuck because you can't break it down into the next step you actually need to take. And now we're going to put that into these different lanes or different columns that you see on the screen here. Okay. Now this is pretty simple, so don't overcomplicate it. Okay. A must-have feature is something you must have in your app in order for the core functionality to work. Now, I want to be very clear that when you are starting with your app, you are focusing on one problem for one primary user and one outcome. So this is important because when you're just thinking of that big picture, full scope app that you want to have, chances are you have a number of different problems it's solving, a number of different outcomes that it's helping your users achieve. And it probably has lots of different user types, but we have to break that up into strategic phases so that we can do the right things at the right time and in the right order. And this is part of doing that. Now, it can be hard to start creating something that is a really slimmed down first version of the big thing that you want to create. Because again, as an entrepreneur, you're constantly thinking of that big thing and you just want to see that right in front of your eyes, right? But you have to do this because if you don't build the right things at the right time and in the right order, then number one, you're going to have a hard time launching your app. You're going to have a hard time bringing users on board, actually converting them, marketing, selling the app. You're going to have a hard time getting feedback on the app that's pinpointed enough to actually allow you to implement it and improve the app. So you're going to have a hard time iterating the app. So this is really important, right? Your must-have features are the core features that you must have in place in order to solve the first core problem for your primary user and achieve or help them achieve the first core outcome that they're looking to achieve. So narrow it down and focus on those features alone, okay? Now, when you're looking at your must-haves, this is very much a first version, and you're looking for functionality. You want the product to be functioning, okay? When we move over to our should-haves, we're looking at something different. We're now not just looking at functionality, we're looking at user adoption. So your should-have features are ones that should be in place for users to be able to adopt your app. Okay, so we're going to say adoption here. So what might this look like? Well, if your must-haves are those core features that are really just getting the product functioning, and should-haves are ones that allow users to then adopt those core functioning features. Well, they might be things like a user onboarding setup. They might be things like a payment setup if you're going to be charging your first users, your beta users. Right? They're things that actually allow a user to integrate this system, your app, into their processes consistently. Okay, so that's how you have to think of your should-haves. Usually they're not a lot of features, right? There doesn't have to be a big jump between your must-haves and your should-haves, but we're looking at two different goals with each of these phases, okay? Now, once we get to your could-haves, these are your nice-to-haves. These are things that are not necessary to achieve that first outcome that we're talking about, right? But they're nice to have. Maybe they make it more convenient, more enjoyable, right? They make the user experience different. Okay, they're nice to have. They're not necessary. You don't need them to launch. They're just nice to have. And then you have your won't haves. Now, this can scare some people because they think, well, I want to include all the features that I have in mind. But again, you have to build the right things at the right time and in the right order. And a lot of your features should not be built right now. A lot of your features shouldn't even be built right after you launch. A lot of features should wait until well after you've actually launched your app. And this is where a lot of people go wrong because again, they're stuck thinking 10, 20, 100 steps out. And they can't focus on the step right in front of them in order to actually make the progress to get to that 10th, 20th, 100th step. Okay, so don't let this scare you. Just know that it's part of the process and it's actually going to help you. You won't have features, are features that are not going to help you. They're not going to be beneficial, or I should say they're not going to help your users until you have a certain number of users on board. Okay, so I'm going to say number of users in general. Okay, they're not going to be helpful until you have a certain number of users on board. Is your community forum needed for your beta launch? No, probably not. Right? Is your review system for your marketplace app needed right when you launch with 10 beta users? No, definitely not. Okay, so think of those as your won't have features. You do not need to be spending time on those right now. You need to wait until you actually see, number one, whether or not they're necessary, and number two, how they are necessary. And the only way you can know that is by observing your users and intaking feedback. So these are won't have features, at least for now. Okay, so we have the very core, the base level of a working roadmap here. You're going from idea, you're going to launch, you're breaking the features now up into different phases so that you can build the right things at the right time in the right order and avoid a bunch of different consequences that can come from ignoring all of that. Now, most people are only focusing on the right side, the far right side. And this is where we get back to what we started this video talking about. The key to unlocking massive momentum and progress with your app and your business is to stop thinking 10 steps out and to start thinking about the one step right in front of you. Most people are only thinking about the thing that's over here. Okay, they're only thinking about their full scope app. They're not thinking about anything else that comes before that. Okay, but when you do that, you don't end up having a roadmap like this in place. And instead, what happens is all of this, all of everything that's involved in their full scope app. And I want you to think right now about the thing you're trying to achieve, what it's going to look like a year from now, 3 years from now. I know you've thought about it a lot, so pull that up right now. Have that in your mind. And now tell me, if you're just thinking about that, and you don't have that split up into phases or steps, you don't know when to implement the right strategies or what those even are, how are you going to get there? How are you going to get there? I see so many entrepreneurs just working off of what's in their heads. And I'll show you what that looks like. Okay. What it looks like is you have your idea and you have your launch up here. Oops. And ideally, right, you want to go like that. But what happens is when these entrepreneurs are only thinking about all of their apps features and all the things that they're wanting to achieve in their head, and they're working off of what's in their head, and they don't have a strategic roadmap in place, is instead they go like this. They start going forward and then they go way over here, and then they go way over here, and they just go back and forth, and sometimes they go way back here, and it just takes so long to ever be able to launch their app. I see it taking 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, literally just to get from idea to launch. It should not take that long. It should not take you more than a few months to be able to have users on your app. And if you don't, or if you haven't started, or if you have started with your app, but you're not close to that, this is probably one of the issues that you are struggling with. You have to get your brain away from just thinking about the right side over here, and you have to instead start thinking about all of this right here, okay? That's the only way you're going to be able to consistently and sustainably rein it in from thinking those 10 steps out and actually start thinking about the one in front of you, because otherwise you're not going to be able to execute, right? And that's the real problem that I see, is there's too much in your head when you're constantly thinking 10 steps out. You have a bunch of ideas, right? But that leads to decision fatigue. You don't know which decision is the right one to make. So you end up just trying to sprint in a bunch of different directions, right? Because you want to accomplish something. And so you end up just putting all of these different things into works all at the same time. And there's just no progress. There's no real execution there. It's just a bunch of struggle, really. And that might resonate with you. I know it resonates with lots of people I've talked to. It's just a constant struggle, but there's no execution, right? I want to get you actually executing on your app. So you have to start on the left side, break down your app idea, starting with the technical features, and then you have to know what different levers to pull along the way. So things that you need to look at when you're going through a roadmap like this are things like testing. You need to look at, we're going to say marketing and selling, but I don't want that to overwhelm you, because things that you can do to start marketing and selling your app when you're in these initial stages, like even when you're starting at the very left, they can and should be really simple. They don't have to take a lot of resources. You can and should implement them early on and quickly without tons of effort. But that's one of the levers that you need to start pulling in order to move your way through the roadmap efficiently. So you have to look at things like testing, marketing, and selling. You have to look at different soft launches, which is basically just referencing test launches. So alpha testing, beta testing. And again, don't let those types of things overwhelm you. When you have the roadmap and the path, it's pretty easy, right? It's kind of like right now, it's like you're standing at the base of a mountain. You want to climb to the summit and you're just looking up at the summit the entire way as you're trying to get there. You're not going to get there. You're going to trip along the way a bunch. It's probably going to hurt. It's not going to be very enjoyable. You're going to get lost. Right? It's going to seem really overwhelming. But if you look up at the summit, you see it's there, and then you look down and you see that there's actually a path right in front of you. If you have a path right in front of you, it's really just a matter of taking one step after the next and following the path, right? Executing. But you have to see the path in order to start executing on it. So all of these things, the testing, the marketing, the selling, the soft launches, these will all be placed along the path as you go at the right time. So they don't have to be overwhelming. Again, it's just a matter of putting one foot in front of the other. So where do you pull these levers? Well, you can pull them here, okay, in between different stages. You can pull them during the stages, right? Your marketing, your selling. And again, that can happen in a lot of different ways. It doesn't have to be too difficult. Your levers here, here, and here in terms of soft launches, right? In terms of testing, in terms of feedback. Now, you can see I'm not getting too specific on exactly what you should do in regard to each of these, what I'm calling levers. And the reason is because every app is different, every one is different. And a lot of this is particular to your goals, right? What is that full scope app that you have? What is it that you are trying to achieve with your launch? Well, that's going to help dictate when you should pull the levers, which ones you should pull, where. Again, it all comes back to doing the right things at the right time and in the right order. And this is a way you can start thinking about that. But if you start with that base roadmap, then you can take a step back, right? Now you're no longer stuck with that big vision in your head. You can take a step back. You can look at more granular steps, and you can more strategically start to place these other levers in at the right time for yourself so that you can benefit from having a process like this, right? Instead of just kind of building whatever you feel like building, doing whatever you feel like doing, there's no rhyme or reason to it. I don't want you to do that because it's not helpful. It doesn't keep you moving forward. So what I want you to do is realize that if you start by laying this foundation for yourself and you have the path, you're not just looking at the summit of the mountain, you can really start to execute and generate a lot of momentum with your app and with your business. Now, before we finish up here, there's one thing that I want to kind of close out with or wrap up with, and that is a lot of people, they look at apps that are existing. They look at apps that maybe they draw inspiration from, maybe apps that they use on a daily basis, maybe for their lives, for their businesses, whatever. They look at those apps and they try to emulate what those apps or entrepreneurs or companies have done. So they start trying to pick apart different tactics and strategies that are relevant to apps that are all the way over here, okay? So for the entrepreneurs that are over here, right, they're trying to look at and evaluate and analyze all of the things that are happening for other people and apps over here on the right side. This leads to lots of problems because yes, some of those people, those companies and those apps may have implemented really good tactics and strategies. Those tactics and strategies, no matter how good they are, they may not be right for you. And they certainly are not right for you if you are anywhere over here. Okay, and really over here. We'll extend that a little bit. They're not right for you. Okay, the best strategy at the wrong time is the wrong strategy for you. So you have to make sure that number one, what we've been talking about this whole time, you're not just stuck thinking about the big picture vision. So you can actually break it down into steps and execute. And number two, you're not just stuck trying to figure out the tactics and the strategies of people who are over here when you are over here, because those are the wrong strategies and tactics for you. Even if they're going to be right for you down the road, they're wrong for you right now if you're anywhere on the left side with your roadmap. So I want you to keep that in mind, because it throws a lot of people off and it holds a lot of people back, because it just adds more decisions, more things that you need to analyze, more things that you need to try to do, and you haven't worked your way up there yet. So make sure that you have the right strategy for yourself at the right time. Right things, right time, right order. It's really important to keep that in mind. So once you can actually make your way over to the left side, you can lay this out, then you can start to see the path, and you can start to follow that path and actually execute on your app. You can launch within a matter of months. You can go from idea to having users on board faster than most people could ever even dream of, just by putting some simple tactics and strategies like this into place. So I encourage you to take this to heart. Now, if you found this helpful, and it's helpful in kind of pushing you to take a step back and focus on the here and now, putting one foot in front of the other, then you should check out our extended training. So we have a free workshop, and it does a deep dive into this. So I did an overview of how to plan out this roadmap, and this training does a deep dive into each of the different phases. It's going to walk you through how to do that on your own. So if you weren't able to kind of put your own roadmap together as we went during this video, that's okay. That's all right. You need to think on it. And this training will help you do that. And then we'll talk about some different no-code tools and how you can actually get things up and running with your app and with your business, which is ultimately, of course, what we want for you. So you can join in on that. It's free. You can head to coachingnocodeapps.com/workshop to get started. But I hope this was helpful for you. Make sure you keep this in mind as you're moving forward so that you can move forward. And thanks so much for watching. We'll see you in the next one.